Good morning and welcome. Patriot Radio News Hour. I'm Joe Jaquint, CEO of the Patriot Trading Group, and our toll-free number, 800-951-0592. The website at www.allamericangold.com, and, of course, the physical delivery of wealth insurance. You know, the thing that's been money not for 100 years or 200 years, no, for thousands of years. Matter of fact, it's the only form of money that's never gone to zero. What's happened to all the other forms of money? Oh, that's right. They all go to zero. But that's why you put it away here, and that's why you put it away with us. I'm joined with my tag team partner, Jason Walker, up there in Colorado, the Valley of the Sun. And I hate to do this to you, Jason. It is absolutely gorgeous here in Arizona. I mean, we're talking high 70s, low 80s. I know that you just got done shoveling some snow.
Yeah, it's cold. It's March. We still get a lot of snow here in March. It's like 6 degrees, so it's pretty cold. I don't know if I like Arizona because I do like snow. I just don't like four months in a row of it. That's all.
You just want to break it up a little bit, right? Yeah, I get you. Speaking of breaking up, the Federal Reserve's inflation story completely fallen apart. Remember when Jay Powell decided he finally wanted to bury transitory? He's going to have to come up with another one. We had CPI come out today, and it was another doozy. So think about this. In January, they admitted to 7.5%. February, now they're saying, Jason, the new number is 7.9. So let's call it 8%. And of course, gasoline prices really didn't start. I mean, they were rising in February. I don't want to act like they weren't rising, but the big jump in gas prices has happened here in March. I got a funny feeling the March number, what are we going to be looking at? 8.5, 9. Jeff Gunladge came out the other day, says, don't be surprised to see 10% inflation. And still, listen, they can have a meeting right now. Jay Powell can have a meeting right now and raise rates to combat inflation. Nowhere to be found, Jason.
That's exactly right, Joe. That's exactly right. And, we have this event that we're going to go to on Saturday, and Kevin, the guy, the show that was on before this one, he's going to show up there. And he's like, well, yeah, I'm going to get there a little later than you. I got a carpool. I'm not paying for the gas to get down there. People are now making decisions around gas, Joe. It's hit that price.
Yeah, so just by the way, and again, how did we get 7.9, or how did we only get 7.9? All having to do with shelter. The Fed is they've raised it now. They're saying that shelter, we're talking about mortgages, rents, home prices. They're up to about 4.5% on the shelter number, which obviously all of us know there's not a place in the country where shelter isn't up double digits, and why it is. And remember that why this number is so important. That's over a third of the index. So if they were actually being real with the numbers, we would have a number much closer to 20%. But neither here nor there, Jason. This is the highest number in 40 plus years, and unfortunately for everybody, the number's only going to get hotter.
Yeah, it's interesting, Joe, the way the markets, the volatility, the ups and the downs, even intraday ups and downs, how crazy it is. But it really, these last few days, it's like gold 2,000, NASDAQ 13,000, S&P 4,200, and Dow 33,000. It's like whoever's pulling the levers, Joe, what are they waiting for? What's getting ready to happen? It seems like a lot of big players are solidifying their positions right now, Joe.
Yeah, right now, gold's up $15 here, 2003, 2004. Silver's up 50 cents. And again, we still have that big disconnect in silver between London and New York. Silver is at $26.25. The Dow, which gained 600 big points. So yesterday, all this news, there was a big, I do have some good news. I want to give some good news. if this holds, and I don't know that it will, we may see gas prices level off from here for at least a minute. We had a big sell-off in crude oil yesterday on news out of the UAE, and the Dow jumped like 600 points. The Dow's now down 400 points. It's all about crude oil right now, and a lot of misinformation. The UAE's energy minister, the guy that's in charge, all he said was, hey, I support OPEC and our OPEC plan. So OPEC, before the beginning of the year, hey, we're going to increase production, which they just did by about 400,000 barrels. They're going to do it again, I want to say in May or June. They have a plan. All he did was reinforce that plan, but somehow that turned into, hey, OPEC's going to open the spigots. I don't know. But it did at least get oil to pause here. Oil's down about $10 right now. Today it's up, but it's off $10, $12 from where we were yesterday at about $110, $111 a barrel. But at least unleaded gas futures, remember, unleaded gas futures were like $3.80. Which still meant we got another 40, 50 cents to go. It's come off of that here, so we're around $3.30. So hopefully, fingers crossed, at least for a week, maybe prices won't go up every single day or every other day, but I can't even guarantee that. Patriot Radio News Hour. We'll be back after the break. 800-951-0592, Patriot Radio News Hour, Joe Jaquint, Jason Walker, and man, there's this article on CNBC talking about airfares, and the airlines can't raise the price fast enough. I mean, yesterday I told you diesel here in Arizona, it's like $5.25, $5.35. It's absolutely insane, but there is this woman, Elizabeth Smith. She's from Spokane, Washington. 6 years ago, her family, there was 7 of them. So it was her kids, grandma, grandpa. They went to Disney World, and they wanted to do the trip again. In 2016, she said that they paid $350 a ticket. This year, tickets are now over $1,000 a person. And you start doing, all of a sudden she's like, I got to pay just as much, if not more, for airline tickets than I had to pay for Disney World itself. And just to give you an idea of how clueless this administration is, and again, this is what happens when you got a clown in office. So listen to this is the Democrats yesterday and even today now. They're trying to come out and say, we're sick of this, sick of these high prices, and darn it, we're going to do something about it. And they had President Biden come out and he's on TV. And trying to defend his administration, because let's say, we all know they've done absolutely nothing as far as the energy situation goes, right? They've known for months and months and months and months. And again, I said it, as soon as the Russian troops were amassing there at the border, obviously, if you knew, which they should have known, that, hey, you know what, we're not giving in. We want Ukraine to be part of NATO. We want Ukraine to be part of the EU. And we don't care what Putin thinks. We could have been getting ready. How about this? I guess if Saudi Arabia and the UAE won't even take his phone call, right? You could have talked to OPEC, right? We could have made plans ahead of time, right? We could have been prepared. They chose not to. And of course, they're coming out and they still aren't saying drill. Not even now. Matter of fact, here's their latest thing, Jason. You're not even going to believe this. But the president came out and actually blamed the oil companies here in the United States for not doing more, saying that, this is a time of war. These guys are making a bunch of money. These shale companies choosing not to reinvest massive profits into higher production growth at a time of war is appalling. That was their comment. So let me get this right, President Biden. These business people who, for decades, right, especially in the oil and gas, decades, hey, I know how to run a business. Do you think they're deliberately, that's their plan. Yeah, I don't want to make money, Mr. President. You're right. That's what's happening. I'm not doing it because I don't want to make money. That's what you think? Every oil company out there right now is doing the best that they can do. Because guess what, Jason? Like everything else, hey, I can't drill if I don't have enough experienced drillers. I can't drill if I don't have all the parts and all the equipment necessary to do the drilling, right? I can't drill if there isn't pipelines and other things set up for me to do something with the oil that I'm drilling. But no, the administration, this is our administration right now. They actually think that these businesses are deliberately trying not to make money.
Well, Joe, and I wouldn't, me personally, I don't blame just Joe Biden. I mean, when you talk about Russians on the borders of Ukraine, and that's when you should start, that was decades late getting ready. Oil is plentiful. There's tons and tons of it. Decades and decades ago, especially during the first oil crisis, people should have been elected when there's like, look, we're not going to let you have false scarcity anymore. There's plenty of it. There's plenty of it, and let's start producing it in the 70s and 80s, Joe. But we went into Saudi Arabia. We created the petrodollar, and in closed door rooms, they said, hey, you can open and close the amount of oil coming in. We won't mess with your oil, but you have to spend dollars. There's the deal we're going to strike. And so decades and decades ago, this deal was struck, Joe. It's false scarcity. There's tons and tons of oil everywhere, but the world is purposely not making enough of it so an elite class can control the bottom of society.
Yeah, and it's not everywhere. There are certain countries that don't have it, right?
Yes.
India doesn't have it, right? Japan doesn't have it. China doesn't have it. We have it.
Yep.
There's no reason. Jason's got a great point. I'm just saying, right, if we would have prepared 4 months ago, we could already be producing 500,000, maybe 1 million barrels more a day. But to Jason's point, we could be pumping out, instead of 10, 11, 12 million barrels, we could be pumping 20 million barrels a day, but they simply don't want that to be the case. There's no doubt about that.
That's correct, Joe. It's a rigged system, and so it all started with our central bank, 1913. Once you get these self-interested private corporate guys controlling your monetary system, you better believe the energy system fell right behind that, the medical system, everything else, Joe, fell right in line over the decades. We should have plenty of oil. We should have plenty of energy. We have natural gas in this country. I think I heard some years ago that we have 150 years of natural gas energy under one patch under some of the western states. Tons of energy, Joe, and we got to make wage slaves out of all the population. You, the bottom social stratum, you need to work for us. And the way they can do that, I mean, look, I just said Kevin has to hitch a ride to this event because it's in Keensburg, right? He shouldn't have to do that. He should be able to get $1 a gallon gas and get down there. That's the way it should be, Joe.
Yeah, and it's absolutely ridiculous. And what we're paying now, what we're going to be paying. News broke today. And again, and I said it yesterday, this whole, Ukraine, hey, we're ready to deal. Yeah, trade talks broke down again. There's no deal here, that I see, because, the Ukraine said, well, we don't want to be a part of NATO, but they still said, well, we're still going to be part of the EU. That's not going to work. Things are, and Jason's right. It's there's no reason for it. There is no reason for it. Airlines should be able, I remember you could just show up. Remember the days where you just show up at the airport? Just show up.
Yep.
You could catch a flight to Las Vegas or San Diego or LA here in Phoenix. They flew, somebody was flying literally, I'm not kidding, every 30 minutes. You could get on a flight and you just get on.
It didn't look like a
And it was like,
it didn't look
it was like $29.
And it didn't look like a military checkpoint when you had to get on a
No,
plane.
there was no checkpoints. Right? And again, you know what, growing up, and I love to go back, because I grew up in Syracuse, as all of you know, still a big Syracuse fan. My mom and my youngest brother still live there. But $5, we'd go to get gas. My mom in her 1977 Chevy Malibu. Thing was like a tank, $5. Like, unless it was dead empty, right? $5 filled it up. Gas was like, I don't even know, like 30 cents, something ridiculous like that. And now we're sitting here and like to Jason's point, people are talking about, I gotta get a ride. I can't, you guys want to go golf? Well, oh no, that's too far. I can't afford it, right? And these are now, think about it today. I've got to get gas today. And that's going to be $70 for me to fill up my car, when it used to be $5, Jason.
Some of these people that went out and bought these big SUVs and trucks recently, Joe, that don't actually need a truck or an SUV, they're now having to spend 2 work days out of their month to fill their tank. Can you imagine that? If you make your money versus your time, and if you're earning a certain amount of money, 2 days of you work, 20 days, 22 days out of the month, and 2 of those days goes to filling your tank once. That's pretty bad, Joe. That's lower standard of living.
Yeah, exactly right. And how many people can afford to only have to fill up their tank once in a month, right? Most people, you're filling it up, probably about 3 times. Some people, it's even farther depending on where they live. Some people are lucky. They don't have to commute that far and only got to fill it up a couple times. But yeah, I'll tell you right now, my wife used to have this Escalade, and it was the big one, and it was like a 28-gallon, tank. I'm so glad we don't have that. I couldn't even imagine, the credit card at the pump. Remember the credit card? You used to only could put $75 in, because they're like, okay, it's gas, you never need that much gas, right? You couldn't even get half a tank for that.
Right, and Joe Biden with his policies of making sure that we're not going to bring any new oil out of the ground here in America, at least on federal lands. He's almost doing the same thing during coronavirus. He's almost imposing shutdowns. Because let's face it, when coronavirus happened, let's shut down the economy, right? Well, when the oil prices get up to $6 a gallon, there's going to be a lot of people deciding I'm not going anywhere. Hey, we already tried this work at home thing. I'm going to start working at home. It's going to be cheaper. It's almost like 2020 was just a rehearsal for this inflation we're heading into, Joe.
Yeah. Okay. Here we go. We got some breaking news here. Russia today has put out a list of items that they are no longer going to send to what they determine not friendly countries, which is, the United States, Europe. Russia has decided to suspend all fertilizer exports already. Food prices at all-time record highs. This is going to add to that. Fertilizer markets now deteriorating. They're surging higher. China has come out, and here's the big part. So I knew this list was coming, but China has come out and said that they are warning that for the United States and its colleagues not to retaliate against this list. Of course, Russia's like, well, you're suspending our stuff. We're going to suspend all of these things. I think fertilizer probably the biggest piece of all of this. And again, when we're talking about inflation at 8%, and we know March number, we're probably going to be looking at 9%. this thing once again continuing to get worse. Beijing says that and I'll just give you, their spokesman was quoted earlier today saying Beijing will retaliate with a serious response if the United States hits sanctions on China over Ukraine. So the threats are back. Remember, the State Department, what was it, last Friday, was threatening China. China now saying, hey, any type of action against China is going to be met with a serious response. And I think that's just going to put even more pressure on all of the commodities complex.
If America and the European nations do any kind of sanctions on China, or China back the other way, then that's clear cut battle lines being drawn. That means China and Russia will be in bed together for good, Joe. For good.
Yeah, and the Dow now down 470. I got news on another major bank now saying, hey, we may have a problem with our exposure to Russia. I'll tell you who that is next. 800-951-0592. And we've been talking, somebody's always on the other side of the trade, right? We've been talking about that. It was the zinc blowout. There was a major, a Chinese billionaire there. Now, of course, not zinc, nickel, I'm sorry. Well, his company was the largest producer of nickel in the world. And like I said, very similar to Peabody and coal. When you own that, you tend to go short. That's just what you do because you're worried about prices falling below what it costs you to produce. And that way, if you're short, you can make up, you can make money to cover, so you don't go out of business or you don't lose money. Well, when it goes the other way, you get wiped out. J.P. Morgan has stepped in along with the London Metals Exchange. And it's scary because essentially the London Metals Exchange broke their own rules. And we see these Wall Street banks do it over and over and over again to quote unquote protect the system. Because what happened, remember, nickel got to $100,000 a metric ton. By the way, that nickel market's still not open. They're waiting for it tomorrow. But what they did is they walked back all the trades from 50,000 to 100,000. So just imagine if you were on the right side of the nickel trade, right? They essentially said, too bad, doesn't count. Now J.P. Morgan's going to set up some big loan. Remember, Peabody got a loan from Goldman Sachs at 10% to fix these things. But we know Citigroup has exposure, the most exposure in Russia. They have the biggest footprint in Russia. But now it looks like Deutsche Bank, the large German bank. Their stock is down 38% since February 10th. And people are starting to speculate that Deutsche Bank is going to be another one of these banks with exposure to Russia. Now, the problem is Deutsche Bank's balance sheet isn't nearly as good as Citigroup's balance sheet. Deutsche just came out with an announcement about in the last 15 minutes. And saying that their exposure to Russia and Ukraine is limited, and they said it's limited because they securitized it all. Of course, these are these derivatives, these dark pools, which we learned really don't mean anything. But here's the funny thing, in their release, they're saying that the offshore loans to counterparties with a Russian connection by wealth management businesses were collateralized, and the collateral isn't linked to Russia. I have no idea what that means. I mean, I don't know how you could collateralize something connected to Russia and collateralize it with non-Russian. But again, this is what they're doing. Think about that. Let's just take this at face value. Hey, we lent Russia money, and it doesn't mean necessarily the government, right? The Russian companies, whatever it may be. But they collateralized it with other things that don't have to do with Russia. Now, they don't say who is it with, right? And I guess now, all of a sudden, not only did you jeopardize the Russian part, but now wherever these other loans sit, Jason, if the world goes into recession, which right now looks like a very likely scenario, all of a sudden now the Russian part of this collateralization goes bad. Other parts and other places of the world go bad, and now we got a bigger problem, don't we?
That's right, Joe. I like the way that you said that breaking the rules. You know, I heard the key phrase "breaking the rules" because you know that there are those that want to break the rules for their own gain, and this is why it's so hard to demonize Russia and Putin. I mean, I've said this quote a couple times, Joe, but you just basically said this is a quote from Putin over a year ago. He says, "We used to behave naively because Russia got put into this banking system right after the wall came down. We used to behave naively in the new system. But now we see that the WTO, the World Trade Organization, it doesn't matter what organization, you can just whatever, the rules are too often broken. The restrictions are imposed for political reasons, which they call sanctions. Plus, more and more of them are imposed to secure its favorite competitive advantages." It's kind of hard to demonize somebody that's just calling it the way it is, Joe.
Yeah, these are things that are making it really, really difficult to understand here as we're watching all of the markets play out, and we know. Listen, we're not as naive to the Russian comments. We're not as naive anymore, right? We learned about all of this securitization. We learned how risky these big mega banks were during the financial crisis. And remember, you know, the funny part is we had regulations against these mega banks for decades. But our central bank wanted to get rid of those rules. Why? Because we can have more control. And all of a sudden, during the 80s and the 90s, they got rid of all of these regulations. Now, these regulations, when were they put in place? Well, they were put in place after we had to close all the banks in 1933. Because they're like, oh, I see the problem. We had all these mega banks and all this stuff, so let's make sure that doesn't happen again. And all of those stayed in existence pretty much until the mid-'90s, and then Alan Greenspan's Federal Reserve started rolling them all back, and now we've got all of this horrible exposure. And there's no doubt, I don't think there's any doubt in my mind. Russia's defaulting on their debt. Ukraine's defaulting on their debt. How many different other companies are going to be defaulting on their debt? And the chance of systemic risk is as great as it's been since the financial crisis, Jason.
Right. And, you know, if you want to break it down kind of simply, we've seen what's happening now in a version before. The Ponzi scheme that is the Federal Reserve system was having weakness in the 70s. You know, all these other countries, they want to go get the gold. They want, hey, America, we want our gold back. Uh-oh, the Ponzi scheme's looking weak. We got to figure something out. Let's do inflation. Let's do oil, and we'll control this whole thing again. It's the same thing right now, Joe. It's a weak part of the Ponzi scheme. Here comes oil. Here comes inflation. Snap these people back into control, right?
Absolutely. 800-951-0592, Patriot Radio News Hour. We'll be back right after the break. 800-951-0592. I still have BUCU. These are the $20 gold pieces from yesterday. And BUCU just means, hey, these are doesn't get any nicer And then the next step is to have it be graded, and a lot of these could be graded, but the cost to grade them just isn't really worth it. They're $22.95. That is the cheapest $20 gold I have. I actually have some circulated 20s. I got about 20 of those, but they're more expensive. They're at $23.25 again. Gold's up 15 here. Yesterday, they threw a price increase the second that gold got to $2,010. So I'm sure they're probably going to try to do it again. They rolled it back today. But right now, gold's at $2,003, $20 gold. These are very high ungraded, the highest ungraded coins you can get. The Brilliant Uncirculated or Choice Uncirculated at $2,295. I'll just tell you, there's a huge gold show in Colorado Springs, and Jason, just like everything else, there's just not a lot out there.
Hey, the physical, the physical market is just not as plentiful as maybe those paper guys will let you think, right, Joe?
Yeah, and that's really the hard part when we're dealing with all this stuff. I get it, right? They have a vested interest in wanting the central banks to get out of this mess. They're in a corner. They've been in a corner. It didn't matter what the event was. It just happens to be Russia and Ukraine. Probably, when you think about it, one of the worst things that could have happened, right? But it really didn't matter. Crude oil was going here without, it just did it faster, right? That's all that really happened is, essentially the price of gas in about 30 days went up $1 a gallon. And again, I've been saying it now for months. There's absolutely a way out of this. And I already know what it's going to be. And so do you. Whether you want to admit it right now or not, that's up to you. That's demand destruction, period. What we're going to see is really a stagflationary cycle, which means the economy is slowing, probably going to go into a recession. The Russia thing definitely speeds up this timeline. Well, we have inflation running red hot. The central bank they still haven't raised rates. Now they're going to at the, in 10 days or whatever it is. A quarter of a point. Think about that. A quarter of a point. They won't have another meeting until May. We're going to get the March inflation data out in April. That's going to be somewhere between, let's say, 8.5% to 10%. And we're going to have interest rates at 25 basis points. That math doesn't hunt.
On their numbers, Joe, it just went up. The inflation just went up 0.5% from last month. And they haven't even done a month. They haven't even done a 0.25%.
Just in a month.
They haven't even done a 0.25%.
And the funny part is, what I'm worried about? I'm worried about inflation may go up a whole percent next month. And they still haven't acted. And again, because they know and let's face it, why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't they? And the answer is simple. They know they can't. That means they know a major recession is coming, and they know, and the problem is that's the banking system. It's going to collapse again. That's why they're racing to get this digital currency. This is the playbook. This is the plan. And all of you sitting there, and again, I don't care. You want to leave your money in the bank and risk it during this collapse? That's on you. I mean, this is what is going to happen, period. They're going to raise rates in March. They're going to do it again in May, and they're going to do it again in at the end of June or early July. And my guess is before we get to winter, the United States is more than likely already going to be in a recession, and the Fed is going to have to stop, and inflation's going to, they're going to try to let inflation run even hotter to keep us out of this recessionary cycle. And that's why it's a stagflationary event until the whole thing collapses into a massive deflationary event. And Jason, I think that's what we're setting ourselves up for. And then the solution's going to be, right, Jason, the digital dollar.
Yeah, digital currencies and less freedoms and a lower standard of living. It will be the future. Joe, there's not a decade since the 50s in America where standard of living hasn't dropped. I mean, you could talk about the 80s being a kind of an uptick, but that was just a lot of extra. That's where the big spending just started kicking in with low debt compared to now. Reagan took us to the first trillion debt, so all that extra spending, the 80s kind of looked like an uptick in standard of living, but Joe, it really wasn't. We've just had a lower standard of living decade after decade after decade, and now it's being given to the Chinese, and the Chinese' standard of living has been going up every decade, Joe.
Yeah, that's been the trade-off, really. And when we look at it, we've had these instances where we have a big drop down, right? And we're seeing that middle class getting squeezed and squeezed and squeezed and squeezed. And I think we're getting ready for another major drop out of the middle class during this stagflationary into a deflationary cycle. It's going to be massive. I think that's going to be the biggest wipeout yet. Patriot Radio News Hour, final segment coming up. 800-951-0592. The BUCU $20 gold pieces, $22.95. Gold's up 14, 2002, 2003. Silver's up 40 cents, 26.17. The Dow's down 400 plus points. The news out of the day, peace talks once again went nowhere. Conflicting, I guess, reports as to whether or not the AUE is actually going to increase oil production or not. And then the big news of the day, inflation came in even hotter than expected, rising another to 7.9%. Everyone's looking for a number between 8.5% to 9.5% on the next inflation read at the beginning of April. And Jason, the Biden administration letting you know that not only is it the Russians' fault, but the shale drillers, they're just being shameful and not drilling on purpose.
Joe, we said it before Russia even entered Ukraine, February or even January, really, for that matter. We said that if this thing happens, Biden was going to tell everybody that, well, we're all just going to have to suffer a little bit. We're all going to have to chip in, and we're going to do it for Ukraine. We got to do it for Ukraine, Joe, and here it is. It's the whole news cycle now. We got to do it for Ukraine. We got to take one on the chin.
Yes. What has Ukraine done for you? Right? Yes, that's going to be, ask not what you can do for Ukraine, but what Ukraine can do for you. And I can tell you what Ukraine's going to do for us. We're going to have, even hotter inflation. I mean, this really, when you think about it, this is going to add, multiple points to the inflation number. And again, it just sets us up for a much harder, more dangerous path. It accelerates the timeline for the digital currency. Really, I think the biggest thing is this is going to happen a lot sooner than most people, myself included. I was hoping that we'd at least get towards the end of the Biden administration, and now, Jason, I don't think we get to 2024 without it.
I think you're right. And we'll see if the Fed actually starts to do the rate hikes and these other things, Joe. But you're right. I think it's going to be what it's going to be. We don't know how far it's going to go yet, I guess, Joe. I guess how far will the inflation go? How far will this stuff go? That's the question that really needs to be asked.
Yeah, and we obviously don't have that answer. I think this is going to be, we're really going to be living in a headline-driven world here. The whole market, one day is going to be elated on news that maybe there's someone's going to make oil or some, possible peace talks, and then the next day it all falls apart. Then a couple of days later, there's more optimism, and then it falls apart. But the realities are, forget about all the headlines. The damage that is being done outside of that is massive. We've never seen this on a global scale ever. As far as all the banning and all this stuff. You can go back, and we did this show yesterday, World War II and how they squeezed Japan into attacking us and things of that nature. It's these vicious cycles that seem to play out all the time. 800-951-0592.